Shit, I never thought I'd be writing this, a damn autobiography. Who do I think I am? I'm Madison Sinclair, the woman who left everything behind to save a failing family business, only to lose myself in the process. What I'm about to share with you isn't just my story, it's the untold truth behind the smile, the betrayal, and the decision that changed everything. The crystal glasses clinked in the private dining room of Ellsworth, Boston's most exclusive restaurant. I smiled as Edward Kingston, the lead investor at Meridian Capital, raised his glass with genuine enthusiasm. After months of rigorous negotiations, I had finally secured an $8 million investment to take Sinclair Fine Foods, my family's specialty food business, national. The champagne was flowing, the investors were beaming, and for a fleeting moment I allowed myself to soak in the recognition. The room buzzed with excitement, but beneath the cheers, there was a stillness inside me. "Madison, this is a remarkable achievement," Kingston said, his voice thick with admiration. "Thank you," I replied, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. I had worked for years to get here, but at that moment, it didn't feel like mine alone. As the investors discussed plans for expansion, plans I'd meticulously crafted, my parents sat beside me, smiling more proudly than I'd ever seen them. I could see the pride in their eyes, but something flickered beneath it. There was an underlying current of uncertainty, of something unsaid. I could feel my mother's hand slip into mine under the table. The gentle squeeze she gave me felt like an anchor, yet I felt the coolness of dread creeping in. "Madison, dear," my mother whispered, her voice low enough so that only I could hear, "this is all very exciting, but when William returns from his program next month, he'll make a better CEO for the family business. You've done wonderful groundwork, but he has the right education for this scale." William. My brother. The golden child. The one who had spent the last year traveling through Europe after completing his MBA, barely checking in on the business I'd been rebuilding with every ounce of my energy. 8 years of 18-hour days, sacrificing my personal life, and my mother still saw me as a placeholder, a temporary caretaker of something that was never truly mine. Everything in me wanted to scream, but I kept my smile firmly in place. "Absolutely," I replied, trying to mask the tightening in my chest. "It's going to be great when William returns." "Everything okay?" Kingston asked, noticing the shift in my expression. "Absolutely perfect," I said, my voice betraying nothing. But inside, the gears were already turning. How long could I keep pretending that this was my dream? How long before I realized it never had been? As the night unfolded, I couldn't shake the feeling of being a shadow in my own success. It was the investors who were excited about me, but my family, my own parents, still viewed my achievements as temporary. It was always about William. Always had been. Was I fighting for something I could never truly own? After the dinner, as I lay in bed, the weight of everything pressed on me. It wasn't just the business that weighed heavy on my heart. It was the realization that no matter how much I accomplished, I would always be second to the firstborn son. The one who hadn't lifted a finger to help in years. Monday morning couldn't come soon enough. I had to make a decision. Was I going to keep playing this role? Was I going to be the one who built this empire, only to watch it crumble in the hands of someone who'd been absent all along? The moment I'd been dreading and anticipating for years was finally approaching. "Madison, is everything okay?" Jorge, the head of maintenance, asked as I arrived at the office early on Saturday. He seemed concerned by my presence. "Another one of those big meetings?" "Just preparing for a big meeting," I replied, trying to brush off the conversation with a forced smile. The moment I'd been anticipating was now just a few days away, and I felt the anxiety rising in my throat. What if they don't see it the way I do? The question lingered, unanswered, as I sat down at my desk, surrounded by spreadsheets and market analysis. But this time I knew there was no going back. The weekend passed in a blur of spreadsheets, financial projections, and endless cups of coffee. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of my mother's face, so sure that William would take over, flashed behind my eyelids. It was a face I knew too well. She had always been the protector of tradition, the keeper of the family's legacy. And yet, here I was, working night and day to turn that very legacy into something more, something sustainable. But no matter what I accomplished, her eyes still saw me as temporary. Saturday morning, When I should have been resting, I found myself at my desk in the empty office. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only sound in the room as I ran through numbers one last time. I had always believed that hard work spoke for itself. But now, I wasn't sure anymore. The truth hit me like a punch to the stomach. No matter how much I had given to Sinclair Fine Foods, my family didn't see me as the one who should lead it. Was I enough? The question lingered in the back of my mind, gnawing at me like a persistent echo. I had put everything into this business. Every hour, every dollar, every ounce of energy. And yet, it wasn't enough to be seen as the rightful heir. What else do I need to do to prove myself? At that moment, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Vivian. She was my former business school professor, someone who had believed in me from the start. We'd kept in touch over the years, but this was different. I needed her advice, now more than ever. Within an hour, Vivian walked through the door, 2 coffees in hand, her face a mix of concern and determination. She set them down in front of me, her eyes narrowing as she studied me. "You're looking at this all wrong," she said, sitting across from me. "You've been anticipating this moment for years, Madison. Now it's time to decide, what do you really want?" Her words stung, but they were a wake-up call. What did I want? I looked at her, feeling the weight of her gaze. I'd spent so long fighting for recognition, for approval, that I hadn't stopped to ask myself if I even wanted to fight anymore. Did I want to continue down this road of constant self-doubt, of trying to prove to everyone, including my family, that I was capable? Or did I want to take control of my future, to build something that was truly mine? "I want what I've earned," I said, the words finally tumbling out, raw and unfiltered. "I want to stop pretending that my family values my contribution. I want to stop living in the shadow of a name that doesn't see me for who I am." Vivian nodded slowly, her lips curling into a knowing smile. "Then let's make some calls." It was in that moment, at the desk, surrounded by all the data that defined the future of Sinclair Fine Foods, that I realized I could no longer keep playing the part of the dutiful daughter. My place wasn't defined by my last name or by the legacy of my parents' business. My place would be defined by what I built and how I chose to move forward. By noon, I had made the calls. I arranged a meeting with Kingston and his team for Sunday morning. I reached out to my most trusted employees: Daphne from marketing, Jason from operations, Tamara from product development. They were the ones who had stuck with me through it all. Together, we would move forward with a new plan, one that didn't involve my parents or their outdated expectations. I sat back in my chair, the weight of what I was about to do pressing on me. What if this doesn't work? What if I lose everything? The risk was immense, but the thought of continuing down this path of familial obligation made me sick. "Madison, everything okay?" Jorge asked as he passed by, his voice laced with concern. "Just preparing for the most important meeting of my life," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. The truth was, I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew that no matter what, I couldn't keep living in the shadows. For the first time in years, I felt a surge of clarity. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to waste it. That evening, as I sat in the quiet of my office, the weight of my decision settled into my bones. I had taken the first step toward freedom. The road ahead would be difficult, there would be fallout, and there would be sacrifices. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was fighting for something that was truly mine. The next day, everything would change. Sunday morning arrived with an eerie stillness. The sun was barely up, casting long shadows across the office as I sat at my desk, reviewing the documents one last time. My hands trembled slightly as I organized the folders, setting them in a neat row on the table. Today wasn't just another meeting. This was the moment everything I had fought for would either collapse or solidify. I could hear the faint hum of voices in the hallway as the investors, along with my team, arrived. I sat in the silence, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. What if I fail? What if this isn't enough to make them see me for who I am? I pushed the thoughts away, focusing instead on the plan in front of me. This wasn't just about business. It wasn't about the family name, the legacy, or my parents' expectations. This was about my future, my independence, and my vision. If I didn't take control now, I might never get another chance. By 9 a.m., Kingston and his team were seated across from me in the conference room. They looked serious, more somber than I expected. Maybe they understood the gravity of what was happening. They'll either back me, I thought, or they'll walk away. Madison, Kingston began, his voice measured, we need to have a frank conversation. Last night, something shifted. I've been in this business for 20 years, and I trust my instincts, but I can't ignore the tension that's building. I nodded, taking a deep breath. I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I've been living in that tension for years. He didn't need to ask what I meant. Kingston had seen enough of the dynamics between my family and me to know exactly what I was talking about. He leaned forward, his eyes locked with mine. So what are you proposing, Madison? I slid the first folder across the table to him. This is the current structure of Sinclair Fine Foods, the one my parents have always envisioned. The one where William is CEO and I'm relegated to a creative role. I could see the confusion in Kingston's eyes as he flipped through the papers. He's not surprised, not really. He knows what I've been dealing with. But I could also see the disappointment creeping in. He knew my worth. I could feel it. And this, I continued, is what I propose. I pushed the second folder to him. A completely new structure, one where my parents and William are no longer in the picture. This investment will go to a new company that I lead. A company where the legacy is no longer tied to the Sinclair name, but to what I've built. The room fell silent. The air thickened with the weight of the decision. For a moment, no one spoke. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I didn't look away. I wasn't going to let this opportunity slip through my fingers. Vivian had told me to prepare for this moment. You're not just fighting for a seat at the table anymore, Madison. You're fighting for the right to build your own table. I had never understood that advice more than I did right now. Kingston's eyes flicked over to his team, and I could tell they were already in the midst of their own calculations. This is unexpected, Kingston said carefully, glancing down at the documents again. You're asking us to invest in a new entity, one that is entirely your vision, with no connection to the family business. Yes, I said, my voice steady. The investment was always based on my vision, my team, my brand, my work, not the Sinclair name. It's time we acknowledge that. The tension in the room escalated, but I held my ground. I wasn't going to be swayed. The plan I had worked on for months was finally in motion. But I also knew what came next would be the hardest part. Diane Thomas, one of the key investors, spoke up. What about your manufacturing relationships? The ones your family established? Won't you be starting from scratch? I met her gaze with a calm I didn't know I had. No. Our 3 primary manufacturing partners have renewal contracts coming up next quarter. I've built those relationships personally, and they know who's truly running this business. They know I'm the one they can count on. Kingston looked impressed, but there was a glint of caution in his eyes. This is a big risk, Madison. You're asking us to gamble on a vision that has no foundation outside of you. We need to be sure that the market will follow. We have the data, I replied. Our customers already connect with our product quality, innovation, and sustainability. That's what they care about, not the Sinclair name. There was a pause as Kingston's team exchanged glances. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. You've been thinking about this for a while, he said quietly. Haven't you? I nodded. For 3 years, watching how my family treated me. How they've always treated William. I knew this day might come, and I've been preparing for it. This is my future, Kingston, and I'm ready to take it, whether my family comes with me or not. The room was quiet again, but this time, there was a sense of understanding in the air. It was as if they could see me for who I was. A leader, a visionary, someone who had earned their place at the table. After 2 hours of intense discussion, Kingston leaned back in his chair. I think we can move forward with this, Madison, but I'll need to do some due diligence. This is a significant change and we want to be sure it's the right decision for everyone. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This was the moment I had worked so hard for. The investors were listening, and they were willing to back me. Thank you, I said, my voice filled with gratitude and determination. I'll show you why this makes sense. But as the meeting ended and the investors filed out, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was still to come. The hardest part was yet to happen, and that would come when I had to face my parents, face my family, and make them see me for who I truly was. The real test of this journey wasn't the investors. It was what I was about to lose. The tension in the air was palpable as the conference room emptied. I could hear the shuffling of papers and the murmur of voices in the hallway, but all I could focus on was the weight of what I had just proposed. The investment team, my team in Kingston, had heard me. They understood the gravity of my decision. But the hardest part was yet to come. The part where I would have to face the people who had been my family for all my life and tell them that their vision for me, for us, was no longer my own. As I walked back to my office, my thoughts raced. What will they say? Will they see it? I wasn't sure if I was ready for the fallout, but I knew deep down that it had to happen. I had built everything I had on my own terms. My accomplishments weren't because of the Sinclair name, they were because of me, Madison Sinclair. By 6 p.m. I was sitting in my car, parked in front of my parents' house. The house that once felt like a safe haven, a place filled with love and memories. But now, it felt like the final battlefield in a war I had been fighting for years. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I sat there, staring at the front door, willing myself to get out of the car. It's now or never. I gathered my courage and walked to the door. My parents were waiting inside. They had always been so sure of their plan for me. William would take over, the family legacy would live on, and I would somehow always play the supporting role. But what if they didn't agree with me? What if they never saw me for who I had become? Would I be able to walk away if they rejected me? When I stepped inside, my mother greeted me with a warm, albeit tense smile. "Madison, darling, you're here. We were just talking about William's plans when he gets back. I'm sure he's excited to take charge." I smiled politely, but it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Excited to take charge? After abandoning us for over a year? "Actually, Mom," I began, my voice steady but firm, "I need to talk to you both about something very important." My father, always the peacemaker, raised an eyebrow. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" "I've made a decision about the future of the business," I said, my throat tightening. "The investment is going forward, but I'm no longer going to be the placeholder you've always seen me as. I've proposed a new structure to the investors, one that doesn't involve Sinclair Fine Foods or William or any of the old assumptions. It's time for me to lead, not just carry the weight of the legacy." My mother's smile faltered for the first time. Her eyes widened as if she hadn't heard me correctly. "What are you saying?" Her voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and hurt. "You're going to leave the family business? Everything we've worked for?" I met her gaze, trying not to let the anger and betrayal seep into my voice. "I'm not leaving the business, Mom. I'm taking control of it. It's time for you and Dad to step back. This isn't just your legacy, this is mine too." I could see the color drain from her face as the weight of my words sank in. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His hands clasped in front of him as if he were trying to hold everything together, but there was no holding it together anymore. "This is madness," my mother said, her voice rising. "You can't just throw away everything we've built. You can't destroy the legacy. William is the firstborn. He's the one who should take over." I took a deep breath, pushing the lump in my throat down. "I don't care about tradition, Mom. I care about the truth. William was never here when we needed him. I was. I've been the one who made the hard decisions, who bled for this company, and now after all of that, you're still choosing him over me?" My mother's face flushed with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "How can you say that? He's your brother, your flesh and blood. He's the one who should take over." I could feel my patience thinning, my control slipping away, but I kept my voice calm. "You always said I wasn't cut out for this. You always told me it was only temporary, but look at where we are now. This company, this success, it's because of me, not William." "Enough," my father slammed his hand down on the table, his voice sharp for the first time in years. "You're my daughter, Madison, but you're wrong about this. You think you can just rewrite everything, that you can take what we've built and make it your own. It doesn't work that way." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in a long while. My father, the man who had always tried to keep peace, had never truly seen me. He never believed in my ability to lead. All these years, I had been chasing something that was never really there, a place at the table that had always been reserved for William, no matter what I did. This isn't about you, Dad. It's about me, about my future, and whether you accept it or not, I've built something that's mine, and I'm not giving it up. My mother stood up, tears welling in her eyes. I don't understand. Why can't we just work together? Why can't you see that this was always supposed to be a family business? Because I'm not just your daughter anymore, Mom. I'm the CEO, and I'm not stepping aside for anyone, not even for you. The room was silent. My father and mother exchanged a look, but neither spoke. The silence was deafening, but I knew it was time to end this chapter. I was no longer fighting for their approval. I was fighting for my own future. As I turned to leave, I could feel the weight of their expectations heavy on my shoulders, but it was no longer a burden I was willing to carry. The truth was out, and now it was time for me to move forward. I walked out of their house, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of my own decisions, and the freedom to make them. Monday was coming, and everything would change. The drive back to the office was a blur. My thoughts were spinning, tangled in a web of emotions I could barely understand. The confrontation with my parents had gone exactly as I'd expected, but the truth of it still weighed heavily on my chest. I had spoken my piece, laid out the reality that had been building for years, but now that it was done, the silence felt deafening. Was it worth it? The question echoed in my mind, gnawing at me. I had been prepared for their anger, for their refusal to understand. I had been prepared for the weight of their disappointment, the years of their expectations crashing down on me. But what I hadn't prepared for was how empty it felt to finally say the words aloud, to finally declare my independence. I parked my car outside the office building and sat there for a moment, just breathing. It was Sunday evening, and there was still so much to do, so many decisions to make. But this wasn't just about business anymore. It was about my future, my identity, and I couldn't afford to waste time doubting myself now. I grabbed my phone, dialing Vivian's number without hesitation. She had been my sounding board throughout this entire ordeal, and now, as I prepared for what was next, I needed her more than ever. "Madison, you okay?" Her voice came through the line, calm and reassuring as always. "I don't know," I replied, leaning back in my seat. "I did it. I told my parents everything, and now I'm not sure what comes next." Vivian was quiet for a moment, allowing me to process. "You did the right thing. You're free now, Madison, free from the chains of their expectations, but you need to be ready. You need to prepare for what's coming next." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I know. That's what scares me. I've been fighting for so long, and now that I have what I've always wanted, control, recognition, I'm not sure what to do with it. Don't doubt yourself now. This is your moment. You've been laying the groundwork for years. It's not about their approval anymore. It's about the life you're building for yourself. So, what's your plan?" Her question was sharp, cutting through my haze of uncertainty. I had known what I wanted to do, but now that the time had come to act, it felt more real than ever. I couldn't afford to second-guess myself anymore. I had spent years building something from nothing. I had bled for this company, and I wasn't going to let it slip away now. "I'm meeting with the investors first thing tomorrow," I said, my voice firming as I spoke. "I'm going to make it clear that this is my company now. I've already laid the groundwork for the new structure, the new entity. I'm moving forward, with or without my family." "Good," Vivian said. "You've already done the hardest part. Now you need to show everyone, that you're the one who has the vision, the leadership, the strength to carry this business forward." I took a deep breath. I'm ready. I have to be. With that, I hung up the phone and made my way into the office. The silence in the building felt different today. The air was thick with expectation, and I could feel the weight of the decisions I had made pressing down on me with each step. But this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt like freedom. Inside my office, I turned on my laptop, pulling up the financial projections I'd prepared for the meeting. The plan was set. The investors knew what they were getting with me. But now, I needed to show them that I was more than just a businesswoman. I was a leader. I stayed up late that night, reviewing every detail, making sure the documents were perfect. Tomorrow would be the day that everything changed. There would be no going back. By the time I finished, the first rays of dawn were creeping through the blinds. I stood up, stretching, and looked out the window at the city below. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of what my parents would say or what my brother would think. Tomorrow, I was going to walk into that meeting, look the investors in the eye, and show them that I was ready to lead. It was my time, and I wasn't going to let anyone, family, tradition, or fear, hold me back. Monday was coming, and everything was about to change. The next morning arrived with a strange sense of calm. The nerves that had plagued me the night before were replaced by a quiet determination. I had made my decision, and now I had to stand by it. I arrived at the office early, giving myself time to mentally prepare. As I sat in my office, reviewing the documents for the meeting, I couldn't help but think about the conversation I had had with my parents the night before, the image of my mother's shocked face, my father's helplessness, and William's smug expression. Those images were still vivid in my mind. But now I knew that I couldn't let their reactions control me anymore. The decision had been made. I couldn't keep waiting for their approval. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. At 8:30, I made my way to the conference room, where the investors would be waiting. As I walked down the hallway, I could hear the low murmur of voices from inside the room. The tension was palpable. This wasn't just about securing the investment anymore. It was about asserting my authority. About making sure that everyone in that room knew who was in charge. When I entered the conference room, I was met with a round of nods and polite greetings from the investors. Kingston stood up first, extending his hand. "Good morning, Madison. Ready to get started?" "Absolutely," I replied, my voice steady, but beneath the calm surface my heart was pounding. This was the moment, the one I had been preparing for so long. I took a seat at the head of the table, my eyes scanning the room. My parents hadn't arrived yet, but William had. Of course, he had. He walked into the room like he owned the place, his casual arrogance unmistakable. He greeted everyone with a smile, exuding the confidence of someone who had never truly worked for anything. I held my breath, trying to steady myself as I focused on the task at hand. This is my company now, I thought. Not his. Not theirs. Mine. At exactly 9 a.m. my parents walked in. My mother was dressed formally, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. My father followed, looking worn out, his face marked with the exhaustion of the previous night's argument. They sat down across from me, their eyes never meeting mine. William took a seat beside them, a smug smile still plastered across his face. The room fell into an uneasy silence. I could feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on me. This was it. The investors, my parents, William, they were all watching, waiting to see what would happen next. I had to make them see that this wasn't just about family loyalty. This was about leadership, vision, and the future of Sinclair Fine Foods. I cleared my throat, my voice steady. "Thank you for joining me today. I've called this meeting to finalize the details of the investment and to discuss the future of the company. But before we move forward, I need to address something important." Kingston leaned forward, sensing the tension. "What's on your mind, Madison?" I turned to my parents. "As you know, I've been leading Sinclair Fine Foods for the past 8 years. I've restructured the company, secured strategic partnerships, and built a customer base that values our brand. Not just the Sinclair name, but the product, the quality, and the innovation we bring to the table. I've worked tirelessly to get us to where we are today." I could see my mother's jaw tighten, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "We're proud of what you've accomplished, Madison," she said quietly, her voice strained. "But," I pressed, my heart beating faster. "But," my father interjected, his voice softer. "This was always meant to be a family business. William is the one who—" "Who what?" I interrupted, my voice sharp, louder than I intended. "Who has a degree from Wharton? Who has a title? Or are you still clinging to the idea that he's the one who deserves this just because he's your son? Because you think that's the way it should be?" My mother flinched at my words, but I didn't back down. "I've been here, in the trenches, for years. I've sacrificed everything, my personal life, my happiness, to build this company into what it is. And now you want to hand it over to him, just because he's the firstborn?" William shifted in his seat, his smug smile slipping for a moment. Madison, don't make this harder than it needs to be. This is about family. I've had the experience. I've worked in consulting. I understand business better than you ever will. The words hit me like a slap in the face. Better than me? I stood up, my hands trembling but my voice steady. I don't need a consulting degree to run this company. What I need is recognition. Recognition for what I've built, for the work I've put in, for the sweat and tears I've shed, and that's something I'll never get from you. I looked at my parents, my eyes locking with theirs. I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I'm telling you, I'm taking this company forward, with or without you. The silence in the room was deafening. Kingston exchanged a look with his team, his face unreadable. My parents looked at each other, but they didn't say anything. And then my father cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion. Madison, you've done more than we could ever have asked for. We're proud of you. But this isn't what we imagined. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat, but I kept it in check. No, it's not. It never was. This was always about tradition, about keeping things the way they were. But the world's changed, and so have I. I turned to Kingston, who had been watching the exchange closely. I'm ready to move forward, Kingston. The structure is set. This is my company now, and I'll do what it takes to make it succeed. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone processed what had just happened. My parents were silent, still reeling from the confrontation, while William's face was a mixture of disbelief and anger. But the investors, Kingston and his team, they understood. They had always understood. This is a significant shift, Madison, Kingston said slowly. But if you're sure, we're with you. We believe in you. I met his gaze, my heart pounding in my chest, but for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I had done it. I had finally taken control. Monday was here, and everything had changed. The tension in the air was thick as the investors left the room, their footsteps echoing in the silence. I sat in the conference room, still processing everything that had just happened. The confrontation with my family had been explosive, emotional, and raw. But as the reality of what I had just done began to sink in, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had taken control. I had fought for my vision, for the future I wanted. Not the future my parents had always imagined for me. Not the future they wanted me to settle into. I looked around the conference room, taking in the empty chairs and the papers that now felt like remnants of a battle I had won. I had stood my ground, I had asserted my authority, and I had made it clear to everyone in that room and to my family that I was no longer the second in command. I was the leader. Sinclair Fine Foods would rise or fall on my terms. As I walked back to my office, I felt a mixture of emotions: exhaustion, relief, and an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. I had crossed a line I had never thought I'd cross, and yet I didn't feel regret. I felt liberated. When I stepped into my office, my assistant Lily was waiting for me with a cup of coffee. She looked at me with concern in her eyes, but also a certain quiet admiration that made me pause. Madison, you're a force, she said softly as she handed me the coffee. You did it. The investors are on board. I took the coffee gratefully, my hand still shaking slightly from the intensity of the meeting. Yeah, I replied, my voice more composed than I felt. It's done. Lily hesitated, as if weighing whether to say something more. What about your family? Are you okay? I sat down at my desk, staring at the empty chair across from me. Am I okay? The question echoed in my mind, and I realized that I wasn't sure. The confrontation with my parents had been necessary, but that didn't make it any easier. It didn't make the hurt go away, but deep down I knew I had to do it. I couldn't keep living in their shadow. I couldn't keep waiting for their approval. I don't know, I said honestly, but I can't keep trying to please them. I've spent too long doing that, and it's not worth it anymore. This company, this future, it's mine, and I'm not going to let anything or anyone take that away from me. Lily nodded, her expression softening. You've earned it, Madison. You've earned every single part of it. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a moment as I let the words sink in. I've earned it. It felt strange to say, but it was true. Everything I had built, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, it was all for this moment, for my future, for Sinclair Fine Foods. As the day wore on, I met with my core team. Daphne, Jason, Tamara, and the others who had stood by me through thick and thin. We reviewed the next steps for the company, finalizing the investment, preparing the public announcement, and moving forward with the new leadership structure. Everyone was on board. My team, the people who had been with me from the beginning, were ready to follow me into this new phase. They weren't just employees, they were allies. They were the ones who had seen my vision from the start. And now, we were all on the same page. We worked late into the evening, refining our strategies and making sure everything was in place for the next day. The investors were ready, the deal was almost finalized, and now it was time to make it official. By the time I left the office that night, the city lights had started to glow softly in the distance. I took a moment to stand outside, breathing in the cool air, allowing myself to reflect on how far I had come. It wasn't just the business I had built. It was everything I had become in the process. I wasn't the same person who had walked into Sinclair Fine Foods 8 years ago. I wasn't the same person who had been told time and time again that I wasn't enough. I had proven myself, not just to my family, but to myself. As I stood there, I couldn't help but think about my parents. The decision I had made wasn't easy, and it never would be. But I knew it was the right one. I had chosen my future. And I couldn't allow anyone, no matter how much I loved them, to take that from me. The next morning, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The investment was confirmed, the new leadership structure was set, and the announcement went live. The press release was well received, and the company's future looked brighter than ever. But as the day unfolded, I found myself still carrying that weight, though not in the same way. It was a weight that now felt like responsibility, not obligation. And though I couldn't change the past, I could shape the future. And I would. This was my legacy now. Not the Sinclair name, but the story I had written with my own hands. And with that, I knew that everything had truly changed. Monday had come. 6 months had passed since the day I stood in that conference room, confronting my parents and claiming my place as the CEO of Sinclair Fine Foods. So much had changed in such a short time. The company was thriving beyond our wildest expectations. We were well on our way to national expansion, with new product lines that had exceeded our sales projections by 40%. I had proven to the investors, to my team, and most importantly, to myself, that I was capable of leading this company. But despite all the success, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that the price had been high. At times I found myself looking back, reflecting on the family dinners that were now filled with an uneasy silence, the strained conversations with my parents, and the distance that had grown between us. My relationship with William had always been strained, but now it was more than just distance. It was resentment. He had never truly fought for his place in the company, and now that it was mine, he resented me for it. My parents, for all their pride in my success, still saw me as the one who had disrupted the natural order of things. I could feel it in the way they spoke to me, in the way they avoided talking about the business. There was an unspoken understanding. They had lost the fight, but they hadn't yet accepted it. And yet, there was a quiet part of me that no longer sought their approval. The decision I had made had been painful, but it had been necessary. I couldn't spend my life fighting for something that was never mine to begin with. Sinclair Fine Foods wasn't just my family's legacy anymore. It was mine. I had built it from the ground up, and it was time to embrace that truth fully. It wasn't just about the business either. It was about who I had become in the process. I had learned to trust myself, to stand firm in my convictions, and to push through the doubt that had always clouded my path. I had stopped asking for permission, I had stopped looking for validation from others, and in that process I had found my true voice. But the hardest part, the part I wasn't prepared for, was the absence of family. Despite the success, the growth, and the recognition, there was an emptiness that lingered. I had gained so much, yet lost so much in the process. My parents were no longer involved in the day-to-day operations of the company, as they had reluctantly agreed to step back. William, now a vice president in the company, seemed to be merely going through the motions, offering advice that was often irrelevant or misguided. He had the title, but he didn't have the heart for the business. And me? I had everything I wanted professionally, But a part of me still mourned the family connections that had once felt so solid. Was it worth it? The question lingered in the back of my mind on sleepless nights, when the weight of my decisions seemed to press down on me. Would I ever feel whole again? But then, I would look around the office at my team, the people who had stood by me, who had believed in my vision even when my own family had not. And I knew. The answer was yes. I had built something worth fighting for. Sinclair Fine Foods was no longer just a business. It was a reflection of everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, and in a strange way, it was a legacy that would outlive the family name. I had never expected to lose my family in this journey. I had hoped for their support, for their pride in what I had accomplished, but in the end, it wasn't their approval I needed, it was my own. As I sat in my office one evening, looking out at the city below, I thought about everything that had brought me here. The sleepless nights, the years of hard work, the sacrifices, and the moments of doubt. But I also thought about the strength I had found in myself, the woman I had become. Sinclair Fine Foods was thriving. I was thriving. And for the first time in my life, I could finally say that I was doing it on my own terms. I wasn't just the daughter of Helen and Richard Sinclair anymore. I wasn't just Madison, the one who had taken over a family business. I was Madison Sinclair, CEO of Sinclair Fine Foods. The woman who had rebuilt a company from the ground up. The woman who had taken control of her own fate. And that, in the end, was the legacy that mattered most. I had done it. I had created my own path, and it was one I could be proud of. Monday had come, and everything had truly changed.